I'm here today with David Pakman, who is a partner with Venrock, one of the most successful venture capital firms on the street. And David, can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me today. And it's a real honor insofar as I actually interviewed Peter Crisp a year and a half ago, who is one of your founding partners. And during those days, he was investing in AMD, Cisco, Thermoelectron, and other companies. And now you're doing a whole new generation, whole new technology. So it's a real treat to get together with you. But before we begin, I'd like to always start the show understanding where somebody grew up as a child and how they got to where they are today. So let's start with when you were riding your bike to school.
So I grew up in suburban Philadelphia, a town called Abington, about a half an hour outside of Philly. Went to school there and had a great suburban upbringing, but I had a strong interest in music and a sort of equally strong interest in technology. I think just sort of the time I was born was the time that both of those industries underwent some really significant transition, and around the time that I graduated from Penn, where I got an engineering degree, those two industries were colliding, technology and music, and that was kind of the beginning of my journey.
Got you. And so you went to Penn, and how was that experience?
Incredible. I was into computers and wanted to learn how to build them. Penn had a pretty rich program of software and hardware. To get a computer science degree, you had to sort of understand the basics of building hardware too. And Penn was a great place, big school, met a lot of super people that I'm still really close with, built a great network, and it's an outstanding engineering school. It was great.
Got you. And again, going back to Peter Crisp, he talked about Venrock being one of the seed investors in Apple, and that was your next move, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, at Penn, I was the only engineering student using a Macintosh. This was very early days of personal computing, and everything was PC, and so it was odd to see an engineer trying to make their way in the Mac world, but of course, everyone knows the story of how Apple eventually took over the planet.
Sure.
But it wasn't so back then, and I had a real passion for products that were built elegantly, that were simple, easy to use, intuitive, that sort of married design and art with technology. And I think Apple was really the first technology company to do that. So when I graduated, I moved to Cupertino.
Did you ever get to hang out with Steve Jobs?
I did. I met him a bunch of times. Actually, when I was working at Apple during school. He was still at the company. He left after I went there. And then I was there when he came back, actually, and I got to spend a little time with him talking about the music group.
Got you. Now, were you ever a musician?
I was. I'm going back to third grade. Fourth grade, I basically played the drums my whole life. And played in a lot of bands around Philly and wanted to be a rock star. Still do want to be a rock star. Still trying to become one. But yeah, huge personal passion in music.
Okay, so at Apple, you developed the entrepreneurial bug. Take us through your next step.
Apple was a major disruptive force to tons of industries. And most of the people at Apple that I worked with were true superstars. And Apple had an incredible knack for finding and retaining incredible talent, truly gifted people. And that was my first job out of college, so I thought, wow, all these companies have incredible people working at them. But Apple really was a special place. And a lot of those people that I was at Apple with became mentors of mine, and they went off into startup land, and so that kind of blazed the path for me. It was inevitable that I was going to go do startup.
Got you. And so what was your next move?
When I was at Apple, I was passionate about music, and I sort of saw this collision of music and technology happening, so I convinced Apple to form the Apple Music Group, and I co-founded that at Apple with another guy, and that was the beginning of Apple dabbling in music and really starting to experiment with digital distribution of music and webcasting of live music events, really as a way to use Apple's technology at the forefront of this sort of digital revolution for music. And I joined a company called N2K, which was one of the first digital music companies. And I went in there as the head of biz dev and also took over product and really helped build some of the first websites focused on music distribution.
And so what happened with that company afterwards? You ended up selling out?
We merged with our biggest competitor, which was called CD Now, and then the combined company got sold to Bertelsmann. And I left and wanted to start my own company. And so I did. Formed that with an ex-Apple colleague in the Bay Area, and that was called MyPlay. And the belief about this company, which was only about a decade early, maybe too early for the market, but the belief was everyone was downloading these little things called MP3.
Sure.
And that it didn't make sense to us that you would store those on your hard drive on your computer, because then you wouldn't be able to access them when you were away from your computer. So we said, why don't we move all of these songs from your hard drive to servers in the sky, in the cloud? And so we built the first storage locker for music. It was called MyPlay. It had about 8 million users who uploaded MP3s to their cloud storage locker, and then you could stream them back to yourself from any other computer.
And so what ended up happening with MyPlay?
Totally coincidentally, we sold that to Bertelsmann also.
Okay.
So I had to do a year of indentured servitude at Bertelsmann. I did that and sort of saw through that transition. And then I left after that and joined up with some guys who were sort of buying up some of the broken digital media assets that blew up during the first dot-com bubble. After that collapse in 2001, there were a lot of really good companies that just were undervalued. So we bought a bunch of digital music assets. One of them was a company called eMusic, which was also a retailer of digital downloads. And I ran that company for 5 years.
You decided to go to what I will call the dark side. You decided to go to the venture capital side. What led you to make that decision?
Well, having been in 3 startups for about 10 or 12 years at a time, I loved the singular focus of being a CEO or a founder and just driving a vision and trying to hire great people and get them to come along with you. But the downside of being an entrepreneur is you have to be 110% focused on just one thing. And 2008, an incredible amount of technology evolution and disruption was happening. We have mobile devices. The iPhone had sort of just come out, and so the entire mobile revolution was about to begin. Social media was really starting to find its place in the world and disrupting traditional media. We had the internet now in billions of people's hands and not just a couple 100 million people's hands. Commerce happening on the internet, being totally mainstream, no one afraid to put their credit cards in. It felt like everything was happening in technology, and I felt like, gee, I'd love to be a participant in all these different technology verticals and not pick just one. Right. And the best part about VC is that you get to partner with entrepreneurs who know way more than you do about each of these areas, but you get to context switch between them and try to get smart on a bunch of different things, and that's been the most fun.
Got ya. Today, there's so much capital out there chasing so few deals. How do you go about sourcing your deals?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is develop some area of expertise or reason why an entrepreneur wants to work with you. Because I think you're right, they can choose a lot of different people, and everyone's money is just as green. So the belief is that we add more value than just our capital, that we have a bunch of experience, and Venrock's been around for more than 40 years and has invested in many of the world's most incredible companies, Apple included, as you mentioned. And the belief is that we've seen this show before and we can offer some guidance to an entrepreneur. But also, in my case, I've started and ran companies, and so I've been through that grind, and I try to help entrepreneurs see around corners. You tend to be focused on the next few weeks or few months of your life when you're an entrepreneur. You need to also think about what's around the corner 9, 12, 15 months away, and so that's one way I try to help. So I would say try to bring some common set of experiences or wisdom you can help an entrepreneur, and also just being a trusted partner, somebody who has a reputation for being helpful and not combative or difficult to work with. We try to be a real partner. Finally, maybe being somebody who an entrepreneur thinks that, sees that you believe the same things they do, that you see the same macro trends, the same waves overtaking industries. You see the long-term game here. The venture capital is a very long-term investment horizon. Our average time to liquidity is like 8 or 9 years. Mm-hmm. So we're investing very early, sometimes when a company is 2 or 3 people. And the goal is to turn them into multi-billion-dollar public companies. That's a long time period. So you have to be aligned with the same super long-term vision as an entrepreneur, and I think that's another way to differentiate.